Give me a home where the centerfolds roam. Guccione on the phone, he got a party going on. And Hef will have me over to play some naked twister. Blotto in the grotto with a playmate and her sister. Ooh, rap stars will love me. Give me a posse, chillin' in the city, sitting pretty in the caddy with P. Daddy or Puff Diddy or whatever. I'll change my name too. Get my hatchback all pimped out.
This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Tonight we're going to talk with one of Broadway's most exciting new designers. Here to introduce him, my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
David Rockwell has had a great career as an architect, designing a number of the city's most popular restaurants and hotels. He only recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, though, has come to Broadway and has really kind of taken it over with his exciting new set designs, and we're very happy to have David Rockwell here on Theater Talk.
Nice to be here.
All right, David, how many shows now do you have on Broadway with your sets? What, Hairspray you've got? Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
And All Shook Up.
And All Shook Up. Triple crown there.
Right.
Was theater always a love of yours, and you've come to it a little later in life, I guess. What prompted you to leave? Well, you still design restaurants and hotels and buildings and all, but what prompted you to get into the theater?
Well, theater was really my first love. It was my first experience about design and collaboration, which is the thing I'm most interested in any design, is storytelling and collaboration. But theater was my first love. I'm really part of a family that was a direct descendant of Waiting for Guffman. My mom choreographed all the local productions of the Deal Players.
Where was this?
Deal, New Jersey. And actually, I just went back to the 50th reunion of the Deal Players, and I went back to see the little stage where I had helped build the King and I sets, which in my mind rivaled Joe Melsener's vision. And it was this, little dinky space, but it reminded me of sort of why I love theater, of the mythic ability of theater to tell stories. So it's my first love, and designing for the theater, I found this amazing way to intersect my passion with my work.
And how did you get into it? The first one I think you did for Broadway was the Rocky Horror Show, correct?
That's right.
Was it did you lobby to get a job designing a set, or did somebody come to you and say, do you want to try this? Well,
I'd spent time on and off working in theater. I worked as a slave coffee getter for Roger Morgan when I was 19 on Crucifer of Blood.
Oh, the Sherlock Holmes thriller, yeah.
With one of the great pygmy chases of all times at the end of the first act.
There should be more pygmy chases in Broadway shows. Right. They'd run longer.
Maybe a category. But at the end of the first act, at the pygmy chase, there was a beam of light that cut across the stage and lit the corpse on stage. And it's the first time I ever thought about light as sort of a physical tool that can carve space. And I've just always been interested in theater, and I go 2 or 3 times a week. I'm an avid lover of theater, and I sketch. So 6, 7 years ago, I was with Jules Fisher, who's a friend of mine.
The
lighting designer. And we had seen a production, and I was sketching afterwards. And he said, so why aren't you designing for the theater? And we had designed theaters before. We did a theater for Cirque du Soleil, and just sort of recently did the Kodak Theater in LA. And as I started to meet directors and talk to directors, what I found was the 5 or 6 ideas that were interesting to me in architecture: entrance, transformation, emotional connection, all of those things beyond style that interested me were the same things that were interesting to directors. Particularly how do people enter, how do you make transitions? So it was really 7 or 8 years of meeting and talking, and some successes. The first show I almost designed was Seussical.
Really? We dodged a bullet on that one.
Spent a lot of time with Frank Galati, and I remember conversations, and I remember this actually with Jack O'Brien and Hairspray and Chris Ashley. The conversation always, it's so collaborative. Theater is a bunch of creative people working in the space, making things move and dance together to tell this story. So Frank and I sat and listened to the songs, and I, of course, took every idea I ever had about theater and put it into this one set, and was really catatonic. They changed producers, and
it was a mess,
so we didn't do it, and I was really disappointed. But it did sort of get me in the mode of literally spending my time designing for the theater and kind of being taken in as part of that community.
And being considered a set designer. Explain this, how this collaboration works with the director. I mean, if you can really sort of specifically tell us how you develop the set, the great set really for Hairspray with Jack O'Brien. I mean, is it the director's concept that you execute, or is it your concept and you got to bring the director along to seeing things your way?
Right. Well, you know, in all of the 5 productions I've done, I mean, there's not really a lifetime of productions. There's sort of a lifetime of love of the theater that I bring to each relationship. But with Jack and Jerry, the first thing we did is we went to Baltimore with John Waters and had an amazing trip and drove in the middle of what looked like a very shady drug deal. And I remember John Waters said to me, just remember, laugh with them, not at them. Very good advice. So we looked at Baltimore. I listened to the score. And as a designer, what I try and do is tell the story visually and tell the story in a way that connects the audience emotionally.
But also create the atmosphere of the Baltimore of the specific time, the early 60s, right?
Right. So much of Hairspray was about 1962. 1962 was an incredibly, in some ways, a very optimistic period, right? It was between rock and roll. It wasn't quite rock and roll, and it wasn't the 50s. There was the beginning of the love of modernism,
it was
new
the brink
materials.
Of all of it, yeah.
That's right. It was sort of pregnant with all of that. And Jack and Jerry, remember, so I came back from Baltimore and designed, I had boards of every scene that was solved, and Jack and Jerry came to see it, and Jack put his arm around me and said, so now, David, let's pick the 5 things that are going to make you fall in love with these characters the most. And so, you know, our design approach, my design approach, is to try and work collaboratively. From the first moment you see Tracy, the design is about falling in love with her, telling the story from her point of view, her perspective, and then finding ways to have the environment move and dance and not slow down the show. That was one of Jerry Mitchell's main
set choreography, almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Really, really well executed. When you sit down to design a set, I guess it's sketches first. When do you do the model then? Just this, I'm sort of into the technical aspect of these things. Because my actor friends tell me that one of the most exciting times in a show is when the set designer unveils the model for the first time.
Right. That is a really exciting time, and you get oohs and ahs. And of course, when you're moving little pieces, there's never a technical glitch. You can always, you know, there's no computer errors. I start out in images, research, lots of research. In the case of All Shook Up, the research was about 1955, and it was this dreary town in the Midwest that had to be infused with Elvis magic. So the research went to Diane Arbus in bleak landscapes, but it also went to Red Grooms in sort of spontaneous construction. And then I start working in sketch and model at the same time, particularly when you're dealing with movement. In the case of All Shook Up, one of the driving design ideas is they want to get out of this town badly. So movement and transportation and method to get out, motorcycle entrance, the
yes,
bus.
It's wonderful.
You can't really sketch that.
But I mean, it's almost like you'd have to have working models of all this wonderful technology. You have the bus moving and the motorcycle coming in. Really wonderful effects. How do you think of those in your head first, and then?
Well, you think of them in your head, and the models that tested out, for instance, Chad's motorcycle entrance, looked more like a toaster than a high technology piece, because the planes that moved, what happens is he comes up through a series of planes, and you know, what's thrilling about theater is obsessing about all of those details. For someone who loves to obsess, which I think designers do, there's so many little details. In Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, we had to build a working model because those 2 turntables, one is eccentric inside the other, and the whole concept for that was if you could, the show was very light on its feet, and the first music I heard was Yazbek's Overture, which had a kind of Pink Panther rhythm to it. And Jack and Jerry's direction was to tell the story very seamlessly. So we conceived of it as this minimalist box, but within that blue box, things would float and move in a very sneaky way. So to choreograph that, we had to build a model that took 2 or 3 people.
Sneaky and sly, sort of
yeah.
like the characters in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah, and something that embraces Lawrence's elegance and Freddie's crudeness.
That's a good way of thinking of it, yeah.
I mean, even the palm trees, for instance, those palm trees where they come downstage and peek behind, start out as literal and real, but turn into abstractions. And
It's interesting the notion of now how important the sets and the technologies become. I remember talking to a couple of writers, book writers, composers from the old school, and some of them complain now that they find that shows are now encased in the set. That there comes a certain point, particularly when they're out of town with a show. And they used to be able to fix things quickly, and when you had flats, you could throw the flat out and make the first act, the second act, and do all that. Now these guys tell me you can't do that anymore. I mean, once the tracks are laid, the set's down, the show is encased in the set. Is that a problem for the musical theater? Are you flexible?
Well, I think that there's a certain amount of the infrastructure and the armature that is set. I mean, if you're dealing with a show that's a turntable show, if you find out of town that the turntable's not right, that's going to be a very complicated thing to fix. But I think if you don't think of design as tacked on, but you think of it as storytelling. I mean, I remember the first show I ever saw on Broadway was Fiddler on the Roof.
The old one.
The old one. And actually, I went with my brothers, 4 brothers, first to Schraff's, which changed my life. I thought of dining as sort of a competitive art form before that, about who could get to the food first. And then from that we went to see Fiddler, and you know, that's a case where the design tells that story.
Right.
So I think when you're out of town with a show, for instance in Hairspray, there were major changes made out of town when we realized that the light bright wall didn't want to be revealed till Welcome to the 60s. That part of sort of lighting that firecracker and beginning that story didn't want to begin that early. So we had to redesign the light bright wall to be able to fly.
You could do that.
So you can change, and I think if you think about design as a series of pieces and not a monolithic, sort of monumental piece, you're really paying attention to the collaboration.
But because design is really in service to the piece.
Exactly.
Because I hear Michael saying this, for instance, Seussical, I think is a good case in point, where he said, well, they can't change it, the set is locked in. You know, when you saw that there has to be a fundamental change, and that seems to me like a lazy excuse.
I think that's true.
You know, that you should be able to dump something at any time if it doesn't serve the piece.
It's costly, though, isn't it? I mean, we're talking
well,
major
bigger
expense.
cost is a flop.
Yeah, well, but major expense, though, to make huge changes in sets once they're sort of underway.
Well, I also think it makes sense, if you're thinking about it as choreography, to have options in your head. I mean, you can't, you know, it's not, the thing about theater that differs from architecture for me, there's a couple of big differences. One is, theater's about memories. You know, I think architecture, you tend to think of it in terms of permanence. Now, of course, it's not permanent, but there's that goal. Theater, it's this ephemeral communal space that you're all in together. And I think if you think of design as a series of pieces, it's good to have in your back pocket how you're going to augment a moment. I mean, one of the things that that I remember Jack O'Brien was really insistent on in Hairspray is we opened up in Seattle with no scenery for the end, which freaked me out. I mean, there was no inventorium. And he said, let's see how this scene lands, and then we'll know how to support it.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think you have to have a certain amount of confidence in All Shook Up. Chris knew for sure. He was quite direct about the second act, having a reference to Shakespeare and being a unit set in this magical place that you explore. Now, we had predicted how we thought those pieces were moved, but that changed enormously in Chicago. And in fact, we changed the whole end of the show to end it in this church.
At what point did you come in with the bus chasing set, which to me was the most magical thing I've seen all season?
Well, the bus chasing set in our original design was much bigger. It was a big, huge train.
Just tell us, though, for people who haven't seen the show, in the context of what does it mean?
So in the context of the show, Chad comes to town, and he's a sexy guy who infuses the town with magic. Everyone falls in love with the wrong person. And Dean gets on a bus and is being sent to a military academy, a little Greyhound bus.
Guy's going out of town on the bus.
So as he's leaving town singing It's Now or Never, and the bus is moving stage right, a bicycle with Lorraine is chasing her, and the whole back wall is moving in the opposite direction. And there's a miniature version of everything you see in town on the back wall. But that started out being a big, huge mega train. And we could have done it, and then we were sort of looking at it and thought it didn't really get to the innocence of the piece. The design sort of overwhelmed the moment.
In your recollection of going to the theater, growing up here in New York, going to see shows, can you specifically tell us, moments of set design which really knocked you off?
Well, some of the early ones, Fiddler on the Roof, as I said, particularly the end of Fiddler on the Roof, where, that's just an astonishing thing.
And what was the end there, the Jerome Robbins book?
The end is that the turntable is moving, and they're all leaving Anatevka.
With their cart.
With their cart, and it's just continuous movement as that thing turns around. And I thought Boris Aronson, who I am a huge fan of, in awe of his work, really. There were two productions I saw of his in the first run. One was Pacific Overtures, with Commander Perry's entrance, which was another astonishing moment.
How you describe that moment for us?
Well, the whole show is done in the style of kabuki, and quite simple, with a runway down the center of the theater. But when Commander Perry comes in, this is my interpretation of it, that the storytelling style switches to a more sort of musical comedy extravaganza, and the ship comes forward as a series of layers. And so the contrast, I think one of the things in theater is that kind of contrast. I think Scott Pask's work for Pillowman this season is extraordinary. I think it's an incredible set.
You've done only musicals, but you must have a desire to do a play or sort of serious drama. Would you like to tackle your Shakespeare?
I would. I did do one play. I did Omnium Gatherum. I don't know if you saw that off Broadway.
I didn't see that.
I saw it, yes.
Yeah, which was directed by Will. Say no more. I did that play. It was personally, I read the play. I lived downtown. It was about the
at the Variety Arts, which we mourn.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I just felt it was something I wanted to do, not because, I got into theater for the love of it, and this was a chance to do something small. And so yeah, I would love to do. I would love to do The Tempest.
Really.
One of my favorite
plays. Can you sort of give us can you see The Tempest in your mind as you're sitting here? What would you sketch if you...
Well, I'd have to find a director first. Part of it is their vision. But I love what the play is about.
Would you ever be tempted to be a director?
It's certainly not on my horizon now. I love being part of the theater. I'm very serious about my commitment to theater, and I'm open to new experiences. We did a film last year, which was the first time I did that, and that was thrilling. So, but I wouldn't say directing is high on the list of things I want to do, primarily because I'm a visual storyteller, and I like to work in collaboration.
Now, we were talking a little bit about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang,
right,
which is a musical which certainly has a incredibly expensive set, a fabulous special effect at the end, but the set kind of... The car, wonderful, the car flying around, and very talented actors, but somehow the set runs away with it, and the storytelling, to my mind, falls short. Can you comment on that? I don't even know what the question is.
Well, is it a danger that the sets can almost sort of become the reason you're doing the show, because there's this theory, well, they're paying $125 for the ticket, we got to give them a spectacle. Is that a pitfall that the set and the spectacle can run away with the show?
Thank you.
Good question.
No comment.
No, I'll comment. First of all, I've got to start by saying I think the notion of spectacle is an interesting notion. Because I think that the notion for me is a larger-than-life experience that in some way triggers a sense of awe.
Yes.
The Macy's Day Parade.
Spamalot is spectacle in itself, but it's contained to serve the piece.
So in the case of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I think, first of all, one goes in with the expectation of an incredible flying car. And it's an incredible flying car. I sat there in awe of the sort of... And I think the thing you realize when you work in the theater is 12 seconds of what you see on stage can take 4 days of tech director. So I was sort of in awe by it.
But I get the sense, though, just in hearing you discuss your love of the theater and the collaboration, for you, you're happiest not if they say just design us the best car you can, but we want you to be part of the dramatic ability to tell this story. And if it means that this set has to sort of go away for the moment, so that in that wonderful scene where Harvey Fierstein and Dick Latessa just do the dance, there's no set there. But, I mean, you're as much a part of the creation of that moment as anyone else in the show. That's got to be the most artistically satisfying thing for you.
That's exactly right. And I think in theater, sometimes the most invisible contributions, look at Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, John Lithgow's performance. I mean, what an amazing performer, where that looks almost effortless. So, you know, the moment you mention in Hairspray, when we heard the number, I of course had all kinds of ways for the Hardy Harhut to expand, and there could have been shtick that competed with their shtick. But ultimately, a sort of yellow chiffon. Now that yellow chiffon does have a silver backing.
The curtain that comes in.
So yeah, I'm not the person to be on a project if you want an over-the-top visual that's just added on. It's not the way I think.
And sometimes the simplest effect is the most potent, really.
It's true.
Is it not? Quick question for you. You design restaurants and you design hotels and stadiums, I think you're working on in Los Angeles, and Broadway shows. I mean, are there little sort of a whole gang of little Rockwellettes, elves working for you to execute all of these projects? How does the David Rockwell operation function?
It functions well today. Ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer. It's a big group. We've been around for about 20 years, so I'm blessed with an incredible group of people that range from model makers and designers to writers. And I was thinking back about the idea of entrance when we were doing Hairspray, to an experience I had with Hugh Hardy, where we worked with him to help renovate Radio City Music Hall.
And he did the New Amsterdam Theater, too.
He did the New Amsterdam, incredible designer. And we went to see the Christmas show, I don't know, 7 in the morning, whatever the first matinee is, an insanely early hour. And as you walked into that lobby, just thinking about the relationship of architecture and theater and the idea of entrance, you walk into that low box office, and you get onto that stair, and you literally feel, you know, physically your posture improve. Right, the design changes, and I'm a schlumpfer, so I appreciate that. And that took a huge team of people. What I try and do is take the project I'm on and focus all on that project. So when we were doing Scoundrels and All Shook Up, you know, that was my sole focus. So you try and sort of move from thing to thing, and
well, it's pretty remarkable how you do it.
Yes, it is. Big staff. I'm sure they're well paid to execute your brilliant ideas.
That's pretty good, yeah.
David Rockwell, great sets on Broadway now. All Shook Up, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Hairspray. Those are the 3, right? And what's your next set? What's coming up?
Don't know. I'm discussing a lot of things with a lot of directors. The next thing I'm doing in the theater is Hairspray in Las Vegas.
All right. The 90-minute version. You're going to have to chop the set down, too? The 90-minute set?
Show gets shorter, set gets bigger.
Spoken like a true designer. David Rockwell, thanks for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Thank you.
First, let's make a pit stop at the Wiener stand.
Hey, mama, take a chance.
Tracy's been years since someone asked me to dance.
Go, the past now. Say hello to the light in your eye. Yes, I know that the world's spinning fast now, but you gotta run the race to win the prize. I'm up to 60. Oh, 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 oh. I'm up to 60. Oh, 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 oh. Go, mama, go, go, go.
Tracy, hey, baby, look at me. I'm the cutest chickie that you ever did see. Hey, Tracy, hey, baby, look at us. Where is there a team that's half as fabulous? I said, go, go, go to the past now. Say hello to the red carpet ride. Yes, I know, the world's spinning fast now. Tell Nola Brigida, step aside.
I'm up to 60. Oh, 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 oh. I'm up to 60. Oh, 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 oh. Go, mama, go, go, go.
thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
Playbill Online is the official website of Theater Talk and the home of the Playbill Club, providing information and opportunities for theater lovers. We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.